Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and start the meeting to try to stay on schedule. I know that there are other members around the Capitol in meetings that overlap somewhat to our budget hearing and that will be joining us later. But I do want to thank everybody for coming this afternoon. This will be the first of several hearings that we have at this time to go into the FY 2008 budget for our various departments. We have on the agenda today pardons and paroles, the GBI, driver services, and public safety. So what we'll have is a presentation from each of those. We'll try to keep the committee, I'll ask the committee to keep their questions toward the 2008 budget unless there's something that links between the mid-year budget and 2008, and we'll try to do that. Also would ask everyone if they would, out of respect for others, and I'll look myself to make sure I'm doing that same thing, to turn your cell phones or pagers into silent or vibrate mode so that we can move right along. The first group we have this afternoon on our agenda is pardons and paroles. They would come forward for their presentation at this time.
Well, good afternoon, Chairman Martin. Good to be here before the committee again. I would just like to again introduce who with me. I have the Director of Parole with me, Beth Oxford. And we have our budget director, also Gary McElroy, with us, and they're paid well to make me look good. So I appreciate them being with me. Couple things I just wanted to emphasize as far as 08 is concerned. I think most of us have heard, I guess, the pride and joy of what this year is going to bring to us is this whole moving from a paper-driven system, of course, to a system that is online, what we call our CONS project, our clemency online navigation system, and that is major in so many different respects. I've sometimes out of knowing that I've talked about it before, I would just say a couple things with it. That it has, I think it is absolutely going to revolutionize how we do business, and the whole process that we're going through right now in terms of re-engineering what we do and why we do what we do. So it's right now we have what we call kind of linear walls that have divided each activity along the way, and so of course that slows down progress. We understand that there's greater involvement with costs involved, but we know that once we re-engineer this process, it's going to help us out with time and everything, and that's going to be a part of our performance measures, even to look at how we're tracking that. We know that this is a small item in terms of the overall 4-year process, only about $3 million, but in the process of that, it's going to be a major impact for the state. So we're very, very excited about that, and I'm certainly willing and able to answer any questions that we may have about it. And since I have spent quite a bit of time as we talk about it, I feel like it's going to be one of the major things that parole would have done in the 4 years to get rid of the tonnage of paper on our floors. One of the things that I have not maybe emphasized as much, though, with the 08 budget is our need for residential substance abuse treatment. What has happened in our environment is that we're asking for, actually, this is all right on page 21 of the tracking sheet. Everything pretty much that we're talking about today is right on the tracking sheet there on page 21. But as we begin to talk about the our need for residential substance abuse, we are neck and neck with the parole board and corrections, and unfortunately, corrections actually is the only place that people actually can get residential substance abuse treatment, unfortunately, and out of the 54,000 inmates, there are only 728 beds, residential beds. And so out of that, we have very limited RSET potential in the community. And so when you have 70 to 80% of all the inmates and parolees have some kind of treatment needs. And so, of course, I want to emphasize this, that what we're focusing in on are indigent offenders. Of course, those offenders that have the families that can support them to actually pay for these residential treatment beds. They, of course, in a much better suited state, but, of course, the higher percentage of those are indigent offenders that don't have options available to them. And so from communities to communities throughout the state, one of the things that has happened is that has helped with what we call out the recidivism rate because these guys end up committing crimes over and over again because they aren't getting the type of treatment that they need. And so my personal experience has been when we have our final hearings, and I listen to them give their last plea of why not to send them back to the general population of the state prison to fill another hard bed. I'm looking at the need that they have for proper type of substance abuse help. And they're crying out literally for help, and the only thing we can do if they're indigent is send them back to prison so that they can get, unfortunately, help and in competition for those 728 beds. Our resolve to that is a project that we're asking for is that we will have a 6-month treatment program where we contract with existing facilities that's approved by us that we can pay through a voucher system. And so we'll pay for those services. And in the process of that, we would actually give them, through this 6 to 9 month time, we would give them the type of residential assistance that they would have. And what this would do in terms of effectiveness, it will give us a 50% reduction, we believe, in drug use after a year after this treatment completion. Also, they are 3 times likely to remain drug-free once they've been in some kind of drug treatment center like this. And then the program participation leads to about 2% per month reduction in the risk of rearrest. And so as you can see, that 2 becomes 4, becomes 6, 8%, and so it increases very fast. So we're very, very interested in this. The numbers have shown clearly that if you can get a person located in one place and they're able to get the kind of help and assistance that they need, then our parole supervision can be more effective in terms of them coming through what we call our successful or completion of parole without reoffense. And that's very important to us. Also, what causes many times our streets to be so unsafe is the fact that these guys are so crying out for medical attention, medical, in this case, I mean medical substance abuse treatment, and they just don't know where to get it. And with the absence of it in our communities, our high-risk parolees, for instance, may continue to go positive for drugs. We see that, so those cause alarms to us. So they end up back into the prison system, unfortunately, unless we can get them a better opportunity. The last thing I want to mention also is a smaller group of those that need aftercare. In the prison systems, they provide a substance abuse counseling, but if they're on meth or high addictive type of drugs, then they have to have a more concentrated aftercare. So of course we always contracted with Spectrum, and we've had them to provide for us the type of substance abuse treatment that has been beneficial to us. But we recognize that it's going to have to increase. And realistically, the numbers are proven around the state that as meth addiction is soaring in our state, drug addictions are soaring. Therefore, the criminals, the parolees, all of them have even more special needs. And so our attempt is to address those needs so that we can keep our streets safe. With this particular type of aftercare, this aftercare will allow us to go after about 400 parolees a year with the necessary treatment that they need. And this would be done with an assessment of a certified addiction counselor and a 12-week outpatient counseling program. And we want to make sure, because I think most of the counselors have certified that the aftercare is very, very important. So as we work in hand with corrections, maybe we can get a hold of this problem. One of the biggest issues, again, I want to emphasize that we see as supervising agents is that we're trying to keep them from going back into the system. So everything we can do to minimize that process, that's what we need to do. And sometimes the absence of beneficial treatment facilities in the communities is what actually is a tremendous problem for us. So on the supervision side and the reentry side, this is what we have made requests in this particular budget.
Thank you very much. Does the committee have any questions, Mr. Hunt, in regards to this budget? Questions? I think you did very well. Let me just
Sure.
to not let you leave without saying here. You did just briefly touch on the con system,
Yes.
and because we had heard that again in 2007. Just to ensure I understand, if you're on the tracking document, 21 or 22. The new cost for the state, the new funds required for that is $796,240. That's on 35.1.1.
Yes.
And you're going to be using an additional $101,500 that you're saving. Commission for a New Georgia found that within the department. So the total cost of that will actually be a little more, but you're doing some of that internally with money you have. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that's a place where they're using savings that they've identified within the department to do that.
You want anything you want to add to that, Mr. Budget Director? You know, he's sitting there a little antsy. I said that's correct. I noticed him moving around, so you know.
He was shifting there. We were working on the body language. You guys on the parole board understand that body language. If there's no further questions of the gentleman, we'll let you go. Let me say this as we finish up with this first presentation and we go to the others. You know, we'll probably be in a posture like we were in 07. The committee members may develop questions after leaving here today, or there may be some members of the committee that have questions that we're not able to be here today. We will try to contact you and schedule a time, realizing that your time is also valuable for you to come back and forth back in front of the committee should that be necessary as we work toward the 08 budget. But we appreciate your presentation today and appreciate your time. With that, we'll go to the next on our agenda, GBI. Director.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, on the 08 budget, I'd like to start out by making an explanation on item 29.1.7, which is to provide funds for an electrical upgrade at the GBI headquarters facility. And the background on this is very simply, the GBI, through our Georgia Crime Information Center, administers the communication network for all criminal justice agencies in Georgia. And we have about 11,000 terminals that we support. And that network is how prosecutors, how law enforcement officers, how judges access the Georgia Criminal History Record System, operated by GCIC. And we have 2.9 million offender records in our database. That system is also how local law enforcement and the other criminal justice agencies make contact with the Federal Bureau of Investigation for the National Center, with all of their databases, and this encompasses wanted records for property, persons, missing children, all manner of law enforcement files. Well, that comes through the GBI administered system, which is at our headquarters. Now, our headquarters building was completed in 1985. And with the additions of new missions we've taken on and new technology, we've actually outstripped the capacity of the electrical system to support all of these, support the network, as well as the additions we've made to the State Crime Laboratory, which is also headquartered in this building. So we've asked for the funds, and the governor has recommended the funding to upgrade that electrical system. Now, we recently had, in December, we had an electrical malfunction. To give you an example of how the importance of this, through the electrical malfunction at our headquarters, it brings down the entire state system. And we had to have, the fire department responded, and we had to have an electrical engineer come in and make some repairs to the system. This will eliminate all this, because quite frankly, when that system goes down, it affects every law enforcement officer who's working on the street. So I would request your favorable consideration of the funding to improve that, do that electrical upgrade. Yes, sir.
I'm going to break a rule. I asked the committee not to, but before we get off that, are we comfortable with the non-redundancy of that system? I mean, that's for a conversation for a different day. But
right.
I mean, typically, if you have a strategic system like that, and something else could happen down there if we fix the electrical system. You could have a bad storm. You could have a number of things.
Yes, sir.
Has there any
this will take care of that. Here we have backup generators.
Okay.
But when the capacity outstrips the system, it blows out the panel, and then then the only repair is to bring in. But this will take care of that. It was an excellent question.
Apologize for the interruption. Please continue.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Chairman, what I would like to address now is the committee will recall in my FY 07 amended budget, the governor had recommended 3 new programs for the GBI and had recommended to the legislature the startup costs for those 3 programs. The 08 contains the continuation costs for those. And the first program, which is, well, the first one that I discussed previously and gave a detailed briefing to the committee on, was the GBI Mess Forth initiative. And I gave, as the committee will recall, I gave an update on where we were at with the meth problem in the state. The initiative that I would like to talk about for a few minutes this morning is the Child Safety Initiative. And this initiative, in the 08 budget, the governor had recommended the continuation cost for that initiative of $845,791. Now, what this will do will pay the salaries for 8 agents and for 5 computer forensic specialists. This will essentially triple the size of our Internet Crimes Against Children unit in GBI. And by way of explanation, the way Internet crimes against children are worked at the national and state level is this. The Federal Department of Justice funds several Internet Crimes Against Children's unit around the United States, one of which is in Georgia, and through grant funding, that is how we handle that at the GBI. There are complaints that come into a national center. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children receives complaints from around the United States. They receive investigative leads from different law enforcement agencies. That center then transmits those leads, those complaints down to the various ICAC task forces, GBI being one of them. And we receive between 30 and 50 of these complaints, these investigative tips each month. The way we have operated previously is we've established different partnerships with law enforcement in state, in Georgia. And we have approximately 26 law enforcement agencies at the local level who have trained some of their investigators in how to work these type cases. And we partner with them and see that leads coming into us go down to that they're handled either by the local law enforcement or by the GBI. But I want to give you an example of one of the cases that we recently worked, and this case has actually been recommended to the National Center for an award because it typifies how the system works, how it should work, and how it can be successful. There was a case worked in Tennessee where a sexual predator was arrested for having sexual intercourse with an underage child. When he was arrested, the law enforcement seized his computer, as is typical in working sexual crimes against children. We always seize the computer because it gives a lot of evidence and it gives leads for other cases that have happened, which also speaks to the reason why we need the forensic computer specialists. They do the analysis of this. When the computer was analyzed, it showed pictures of the pedophile who was arrested there, the sexual offender was arrested, having sex with a woman and also having sexual contact with an infant child, 6 to 8 years of age. The Tennessee authorities contacted us because they had determined through interviews that the child victim was believed to be located in Georgia. They contacted our agency. The Internet Crimes Against Children unit in GBI immediately proceeds with the case because these type investigations are very time sensitive, and particularly when you have a child that's in danger. Through working various leads in the case, including cell telephone records and some other areas that we had to pursue, we were able to identify where the child was. We served a search warrant with local law enforcement and went to the house, determined we had the right child. Child is taken into custody, make sure that it is safe. As the investigation proceeds, the woman is identified as being the child's mother, the one who's involved in the sexual activity. She was also involved in the molesting of the child, and charges have been brought against the mother, and they are certainly against the sexual offender in Tennessee. And those cases are pending prosecution. But this typifies the seriousness of these type cases and the need for there being a unit that is specially trained and has the capacity to make an immediate response and track down the offenders and proceed with prosecution. This initiative would, if you fund this initiative, as I previously said, this will allow us to triple the size of the personnel we have devoted to this. This type of investigation requires specialized training. It requires specialized resources, and this will provide all of that. The third initiative, which I won't go into in detail unless the committee has questions, relates to the Georgia ID Integrity Initiative, and the governor had recommended funding in 2008 of the annual cost for 3 agents that would be assigned to the unit, and we would work in concert with the Department of Driver Services to conduct investigations of instances where fraudulent documents are submitted to the state of Georgia to obtain a driver's license or a Georgia ID card. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Keenan. And congratulations to your agents for doing such a good job catching the perverts. Hope to get many more of them. The question I want to ask is, what level does the GBI do background checks for employers, such as I as a employer want to do a criminal background check on a potential employee? Could I contract with you guys on that?
No, we administer the system that houses the criminal history records at the state level, and then we're connected to the national level. But the system works this way. Under Georgia law, felony convictions are public records, so any employer can obtain that with by just going to a law enforcement agency with the appropriate identification information and having the record pulled. Other than felony conviction records, the other criminal history records are restricted, and the only way an employer can obtain that is with consent of the employee, and they can only do that at the state level.
Okay. The reason I ask this, are you aware of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations program where they actually have an income generating program where they can do those background checks? Is this something we can maybe look at for the GBI in the future? I know until we get your electrical stuff ready to go for the computer stuff.
Yes, several states have done that, have used actually they sell their criminal history records. And the funding goes in two ways. Some of it, the best way for the funding would to go back and support the system that's generating the records. The other part goes into a general fund to go through the regular budget process. Our position has been up to this point is that the citizens have already paid for these records at one point, and so GBI has not been in the business of reselling something to them they've already paid for.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Committee have further questions, Director? Director, I have a question, if you don't mind. The first item you started with, 29.1.1, the funds for the electrical upgrade.
Yes, sir.
Is that a project that is, if you will, in the can, design, ready to build, just awaiting funds?
That's correct. The budget for that was based on our work with the electrical engineering.
So, I mean, if the funding were available, you have to do the bid for the work, but you're just awaiting the bid process?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm just curious, given we're sort of paralleling the two budgets at this point, would there be any benefit to moving a portion of that if we could find the funding to moving a portion of that into the 07 budget so that it could be expended. And I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I just, if that is a critical need, it's clear that it's going to be funded. If we found the ability to move some of that funding into 07 so that when the budgets are passed and signed by the governor, you would be free to go ahead and start the bid process. I'd like to talk to you about that, I guess,
Yes,
offline to see if we could do anything.
Yes, sir.
Given that is something that's been recommended so that the funding mechanism doesn't gate your progress on that.
Yes, sir. Thank
I'd
you.
like to talk about that. Committee have any further questions? We have before us the FY08 budget for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Any further questions? We have some additional members of the committee, and I'll just mention this, that we are having the departments in. If you develop a question after we leave today, we'll be happy to have representatives of the proper folks from each of the departments. They've been very good to work with us, and I want to thank them again for doing that. I do have a question. Representative Sims.
Commissioner, I just would like to meet with you afterwards on some issues we've talked about before, and I just want to ask you about them.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Committee has no further questions. We'll move on to the agenda. No further. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, sir.
Next item, or the next group we have on the agenda is Department of Driver Services.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Commissioner Dozier sends his regrets. He was unable to attend due to a previous engagement. The first two items in the 08 budget are the ongoing funding that is associated with items that are in the supplemental budget for 07.
If I could, just for the members on the tracking documents on page 16, please.
The first item is for the ongoing expense for the 10 additional investigators working with the Georgia Secure ID in partnership with the GBI. The second item on there is for the 26 positions that are for two new customer service centers that are in Loganville and in Clayton, that we're partnershiping with those counties. We'll be supplying the employees for the facilities. The third item on here is to reduce some one-time costs that was associated to two facilities in the 07 budget. One of those was for the Blue Ridge Center that just opened, as well as we're working on the renovations to the Athens facility that will be handled before the end of the fiscal year. The next item is to provide funding for implementation of an electronic document imaging system. It is a system that is very much needed with our organization due to the fact that we bring in between 5 million and 15 million documents a year based on what kind of driver's license you're here to apply for within the state. And this is to help us to eliminate the paper and the microfilm, which is old technology, to move to newer technology where it's retrievable much faster than what we have at this particular time. The last item that's listed on here is for 14 additional positions that will go in our customer contact center. Right now we are looking to try to improve the abandon rate so that we can answer more questions for more citizens within a limited amount of time, which is for 3 minutes or less. Right now we're only able to answer about 60% of the calls that come in, and we're also looking to expand the hours that would be more conducive to the citizens of Georgia, where we would be open earlier in the morning to later in the afternoon, as well as on Saturdays. That concludes our budget request for 08.
Thank you. Had a couple of questions. Representative Sims.
So I'd like to thank you for what y'all do. I know you don't get a lot of credit for getting all this stuff done. I just want to know on the 20-2-5 there, the 14 positions, are those folks going, the phones that they're going to be operating on, are they going to have a call waiting and also a recorder on them?
They have the opportunity to where the supervisors can listen in at any particular time, as well as what happens is our phone calls come into a queue. They're not actually, which is a holding queue and then the next available agent is able to pick up the phone from that particular time.
That's been the one complaint that I've had that in my office, that they can't get a hold of somebody. And with that, if I may follow, Mr. Chairman, the issue with that is the fact that if they'll answer the phone that's called, and I don't know, instead of putting them on hold or putting them in an answering machine, which is it drives me crazy if I pick up and I can't get a hold of somebody, and I know it does to people that have got to get a question answered. I think that would help you if you don't have an answering machine.
Absolutely. We've have partnership with the Office of Customer Service on our contact center and some of the issues that are there. We initially, with the abandon rate that we had moved a trunk line over to allow more phone calls to come into the queues. Initially, they were getting a quick busy signal, and therefore it was frustrating someone right up from the very beginning. We've also worked to segment out the different types of questions that someone may have, to where they go through an automatic routing system to depending on what your question is. Some questions, of course, are more complicated than others.
One more follow-on question, Mr. Chairman. The last one, I guess, on that is there's been a lot of problems with truck drivers and getting those truck licensing. Is there anybody, I know y'all don't do licensing, but do y'all have any issues? Do you hear more issues about that with the truck drivers not coming on?
No, sir, not really. Initially, we did experience some issues with commercial drivers based on having to get the background check done.
Yes, ma'am.
And there was some delay from the federal side. We had that for a brief period of time, but we've not really experienced any huge response to any issues that are occurring.
Okay, thank you.
Committee have further questions? Department of Driver Services. I have two, if I could.
Yes, sir.
And these may be something to look into and get back with me, or you may have the answer. Your electronic document imaging system, I mean, that is the software underneath, and what you actually may need to do with that those documents is going to be different, obviously. But pardons and paroles is implemented. Cons is essentially that. They're scanning thousands of pages. I think they may be gone now. But when Mr. Hunt was here earlier in the 07 presentation, I thought he said something on the order of 55,000 pounds of paper that they have over in that building that they're trying to get in, and so that's a huge volume. How does your volume compare to that? Not in terms of pounds. I mean, would you suspect you're going to have more paperwork than they? And the reason I'm getting to that is they're doing their system for a good deal less money here. I'm just trying to understand what we're buying. Are we buying a CAN package? Are we building one? Is this for a conversation we can do a different day if you're not sure about the exact project? Could I get additional information on what we're getting for that too?
I mean, I can answer you if you'd like for me to share that information. What it is we are looking for a CAN package.
Right.
The only thing that would be something that would be customized to us would be the indexing of looking for the various documents. Of course, document-wise, it depends on what you come in to get from us, whether you're getting a commercial driver's license, whether you're a 16-year-old getting your license initially, as well as we're trying to prepare for the future depending on what may happen at the federal level.
Sure.
But we do stay behind in the document imaging now, I mean, of just the microfilm, but I wouldn't say that we have near that kind of paper problem. Our problem is more of the retrieval after the fact with the convictions and all that come in.
I think for me, if maybe we could just, at a later time offline, I'll share with the committee members if they're interested, is to find out what the sort of scope of that is. And it may well be easily explained in that you're trying to put this out at a lot more different locations than pardon and paroles. They're doing it at a central location.
Yes, sir. And we are
less
looking
hardware and so forth, but it begs that question.
Yes, sir.
And to follow up with that, and this is something I'll sort of ask if anybody department is going to add customer service folks, and we can talk about this later as well, but how are those being implemented? Are they going into the same centers now? Are we looking at opportunities for these folks? You talk about expanded hours. Technology exists so that you can queue up things at a central location and actually ring phones at at people's houses who they choose to work from home. And just like the Commissioner to look at, possibly doing that. I think the Governor started that program about 3 or 4 years ago about trying to encourage some telecommuting. And clearly, if we're trying to make ourselves available when people, hours when they are available, that
Right.
may mean somebody working, 4 to 8 p.m. at night. If we could, make somebody have the opportunity to do that from their home rather than having to be in an office, saves us office space, it saves them commute, it provides them that opportunity. Just, again, let you run your department, you and the Commissioner run the department, but would ask that you guys look into that. I think that's what we are doing around other places in the state.
And we're looking at various staffing plans, whether it be, 2 part-time people that may serve for a full position, those kind of areas. We did have brought the phone calls that were going to the local customer service centers. We had those now routed back to the main customer service center or contact center.
Sure.
Because the examiners were answering phone calls and not waiting on the customers that were there. So we are continually looking at that.
Fair enough. I just know the technology exists that you
Absolutely.
can trunk them all together, queue them, and fire them out to, over a network that's dispersed.
Yes, sir.
So that'd be great with the voice over IP. Representative Sims.
Question, I'm sorry to keep asking. Has the problem with the Nassau County, Florida issue down there, I've got some folks that have had fines in Nassau County. Are you aware of that problem?
No, sir, I'm not. But
The tax commissioner or whoever takes up, the probate judge or whoever it was down there, absconded with all the fine money and did not report this. And I've got people that are now showing up with fines that were not paid, and their license were being suspended. And it was inadvertent. They had paid their fines, and it's showing up on a national register that they have not paid the fines. I've had at least 3 calls on it, and I'm sure there are more. You may be hearing about this, but
and that's from out of Florida, right?
Yes, ma'am.
That would be reporting to us,
yes, ma'am,
right?
I was just wondering how that procedure would work in helping these folks with this. What we're trying to fund here, would that help this situation with something like that?
Yes, sir, because what happens when a citation comes in from an out-of-state jurisdiction, they either send us the paper copies or either we're looking for it to be electronic to us.
Yes.
And we would have those copies then on file to where we could go back and do some research in regards to what occurred.
Well, from what I understand about this case, that all the folks that were out of state or out of county would probably not come back to Fernandina Beach, which is the county seat,
Right.
to try to do anything. They just paid the fine and left.
Absolutely.
Thought it was paid, even had a receipt.
Mm-hmm.
But most time you just throw the receipt away. They don't know to keep that, especially with young folks. And you may be hearing more about that.
Okay.
But I do have at least 3 constituents with that problem.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I think I had a question in number 27. I don't know who 27.
I forgot my answer.
You have your answer. Any further questions? Department of Driver Services. Not. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, the Department of Public Safety.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Sergeant First Class Mark McDonough. I'm Colonel Bill Hitchens' executive assistant. Colonel Hitchens is unable to be here today. He sends his regards. He has his responsibility to be at Post Council today. They're reviewing the rules that govern Post Council, and so he's got another commitment. So the B team is here. That consists of myself, Robert Orange, who has handed some handouts to you. He's our budget director, and our comptroller is Joe Hood. Most of you know Joe Hood. I'm referring to the fiscal 2008 budget on page 22 of your tracking sheet. We have a flat budget this year, and there are only really 2 items of interest on here. The first is line 37.5.1, and I smile at this because it shows that our folks at OPB have got a sharp pencil when they removed what was a one-time amount of money for our new motorcycle unit. We would have loved to have them have missed that and had those funds, but they did not, and so it shows that they're doing a good job. The second is line 37.5.2. That's the funding for the statewide interoperability communication system. I know there's been a lot of questions about this, but the hardware for this system has been purchased through Homeland Security funding. But what these dollars are to pay the phone line bills. And this is an annual request. The system is hooked by T1 lines, and we got to pay the phone company for their infrastructure and the T1 lines that connect these things together. Outside of that, those are the only two items of interest that are on the budget. We listened very closely to the chairman when he said, please provide us all of the copies of the things that we use with OPB. And those are the two handouts that have been handed out to you. The slide presentation that has a blue cover is what we presented to OPB at the beginning of the year. And if you turn to page 3 of that, you can see what our agency priorities are: vehicle replacement, personnel, and capital improvements. Those have been consistently our priorities over the past 3 years. The second document that you have is what we've worked with recently, and that is a request that we're going to make today. We've worked through our policy advisor with the governor's office, Hannah Heck, and also with our OPB analyst. And what we've done is identified 50 patrol vehicles that are blue and grays, that are pursuit vehicles that are driven by our frontline troopers. We've got a lot of vehicles to replace, but we wanted to prioritize that in relationship to the cadets that we have in trooper school that will be graduating in August. Currently we have 41 cadets, and so we've identified 50 vehicles that we're asking additional funding because we'd like to bring our average patrol miles down on our vehicle fleet. You see the handout right now. When we have a cadet come out of school, he gets issued a patrol vehicle with 120,000 miles plus change. And that's actually a good thing because these folks are not very, how can I say, experienced. And a lot of mistakes are made in the first couple of months and years of driving a vehicle. So it's nice that they bend an old one up instead of a brand new one. But with that type of purchase of those 50 vehicles, you can see that we'd bring down that average mileage to $104,000. One additional thing that adds to that is when we have a new patrol vehicle, we can avoid costs for high vehicle maintenance. So that is one of our consistent priorities, and that's an additional request that we have for the committee's consideration. And outside of that, if there's any questions.
Excuse me, Representative Sims.
Are you noticing any particular maintenance problem with the Crown Victorias, especially with the transmissions?
Yes, sir. Normally, when one of our vehicles gets over 80 to 90,000 miles, we can expect that we're going to replace a transmission. And right now, that cost per patrol vehicle is a little over $800.
Are you rebuilding engines now? Are you taking rebuild? I know that.
What we do is we use a lot of our old patrol vehicles and we cannibalize from them. If we have
Robin from Peter to St. Paul.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you for being here today, Sergeant.
Yes, ma'am.
How are the maintenance items over at your headquarters coming along? I know when we took a tour last year, I was just appalled to see the condition that the state had allowed the building to get to. And I know we appropriated some repairs for some roof maintenance. Has that helped with some of the leakage that you've had?
Yes, ma'am. A lot of the tiles that you saw and the cans that were in the hallway. Last year, y'all gave us graciously some funds, and we did repair our roof. And it has helped in the majority of places. We still have some leaks, but it's a far cry better than where we were.
Okay. May I ask another question, Mr. Chairman? Sure. Y'all are still unable to drink the water or even wash your hands in the headquarters building due to the condition of the pipes. Is that still a problem for you guys over there?
Yes, ma'am. We have bottled water that we use in our facility.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, at some point this year, I'd like to see what we can do about helping out, cleaning out that headquarters building a little more and maybe even upgrading it.
I think we could be at that point if we want to take that on. I know there's been some conversation. Chairman Day is not here today, but with the salary committee, and we had committed, and we make that commitment again to look into that. I know that was not part of the recommendation, and I know that there's been interest expressed. I think you probably have bipartisan support on this committee to look into that. Looking, if I can, there may be other questions. Looks like you have somewhere in the just slightly over 400 vehicles. Is that's cars?
The document that you've been provided is all of the vehicles that we have in the fleet. Is your question specifically for those under 100, over 135,000 miles?
No, just in general.
1,300, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
so
sir.
that's what you have in there. Well, I was just looking on the document here. Okay, so I understand. This is the document only of vehicles that are over 120,000.
Yes, sir. It's
Okay,
a tracking sheet. Yes, sir.
That's what I was trying to. Excuse me. That's what I was trying to get to, is to track this exactly. So if we were, I'm sorry, got me all choked up. Sorry. So if we were trying to put ourselves in a situation and said that our average fleet was going to be, or was, 12 to 1,300 vehicles, and we wanted to get into a rolling situation where we purchase this many new cars, and we could you guys could develop a plan of what it would take, because you in general know the average miles that's going to be put on a vehicle over a year. We could develop a plan that we could put forth a policy that we want to keep the fleet at this age, and develop a situation that we would replace this many cars on an annual basis in order to roll that, basically keep the rolling average of miles reasonably consistent.
Yes, sir.
Could we not do that?
Yes, sir, we can, with the existing rules from DOAS of a replacement at 135,000 miles. Our average patrol vehicle puts about 28,000 miles per year, and over the course of 5 years is where we get to that mark. And with that number of vehicles, it requires an annual replacement of about 270 vehicles to maintain that schedule per year. Approximate cost of about $5.7 million a year. And you can see consistently with our requests, both with our annual budget and the amendments, that we're continually trying to chip away at that replacement. And it would be great to have an annualized amount of dollars to do that.
Well, I mean, I know that's an expensive process, and I don't mean to make it sound like it's an easy one to accomplish. But it seemed like it would be prudent to plan, to know, so that we don't get in a situation where we have a surprise to come up. Does the committee have further questions? Public safety. Again, we understand there's some items that they're not going to talk to us about today, but we're going to talk to them about at the appropriate time.
Mr. Chairman.
That would be one of the things that I think we'd talk about. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment?
Please.
Thank you. Sergeant, if you could express my appreciation to our new motorcycle unit and the great job they did with the press conference yesterday. It was good to see all the troopers out there, and I was very proud to be a part of that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
I see no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I know you will be available if the committee wishes to have further conversation.
Yes, sir.
I had a folder drop from the Sheriff's Association. Excuse me, I'm having a lot of trouble with my voice. Would you like to come and speak to this?
I certainly wouldn't, Mr. Chairman. If it would be okay, and I'm going to do it from here. It's just very brief.
Well, we just need you to get up there, because we're on the web and we can't hear your voice from back there. I'm sure folks are going to be interested in it. We'll do that under the title of public safety as well here, since you're here and we have ample time.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and members of the committee, thank you for giving me this opportunity. And most excellent staff. You have a great staff, Mr. Chairman, and we appreciate them also. Very briefly, our little request. We are under the Georgia Post Council Peace Officer Standards and Training Council budget. Is that still Budget B? It used to be. It used to be years ago Budget B, but it's under DPS's overall budget. And we have a continuation budget in the Post Council budget now of about $381,300. In addition to that, we had talked last year, never were able to actually allow this request to materialize, but we talked last year about maybe having a little more money to provide specialized training for our 300 or so deputies that do the actual tracking of sex offenders throughout the state. So that cost, as our projection shows on our memo, was about $77,200. We had intended to use that money in two sites, one North Georgia site, one South Georgia site. That would pay for the cost of conducting that training, as well as the per diem cost for those officers that show up. In addition, there was about $41,300 was the other figure in there that we had asked for to help us offset the cost of other specialized training that will help us train sheriffs and the officer sheriff in complying with the mandates imposed upon the officer sheriff at the local level. As you all know, because I think we have almost burdened y'all to the extent where y'all don't want to hear from us anymore, the officer sheriff does what it does because our General Assembly over time has told them to do these things. There are not any other local agencies, not to diminish the importance of any other local agency, but you don't see that about any other local agency. Sheriffs do what they do because we in the General Assembly have asked them to do that. So this is an attempt to upgrade us a little bit at the association level to provide this training.
Does the committee have any questions, Mr. Norris? Everyone have the handout? Pardon me? From the Georgia Sheriff's Association. Committee have any questions?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Members of the committee, that concludes the agencies we had scheduled today. I must admit, I had them schedule these four agencies in anticipation of this taking about an hour and a half. We got through it in an hour. I don't know if that's good news for the agencies or bad. We'll determine that at a later time, I suppose. But I do appreciate everyone's attendance. I appreciate the agencies in their presentations and look forward to continuing to work with them. I believe we are set for our next hearing tomorrow at 1, if I'm not mistaken, in this same room, I believe. Is that correct, Jeanette? Let me stand corrected on the...
Let me check. 5:15.
I'm sorry, tomorrow's meeting is at 1 o'clock and 5:15 for our next hearing. Does the committee have any further business? Anyone have a question or any further business before the committee? Yes, sir.
We have the 08 budget, corrections, juvenile justice, appeals, defense, PAC, and DAS.
Tomorrow's gonna be fun day then, huh?
Yeah, that's what I like there. Yes, that's what it is.
It's probably Department of Administrative Services.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Let's hang with me, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir.
What's your schedule, Mr. Chairman, as far as sitting down and resolving what we're going to be looking at as far as funds and working out the budget requests for the various departments?
Well, we need to do that for 07. We'll do that when we come back. I'm waiting direction from the chairman as to when he wants us to get to that number. As everyone, I think, is well aware, we have issues going on in Washington, D.C. that have a great impact on our 07 budget. So rather than we get down to what we know we have to, we will not be making those decisions. The committee will be notified when we get ready to come forward with those recommendations. We're running a parallel process on the 07 mid-year budget and the 08 budget to start those, and I'll make everyone aware.
Maybe April.
I hope not, but it could be. So if there are no further comments or questions before the committee, we'll stand adjourned until 1 o'clock tomorrow and 5:15. If there's no objection, we'll stand adjourned. Without objection, we are adjourned.